What's up, everybody? Welcome back in. We are here. We are ready to talk more about this Karen Reed trial now that it's over because the case isn't over yet and stuff is still happening. As we have seen, Trooper Proctor has found himself in some trouble. There have been some reports coming out about multiple areas that he's being investigated and multiple different problems that could come his way, including what's already happened to him, which we will discuss. We'll also watch a video from one of the colonels over at the Massachusetts State Police, see what he has to say about it and how it affects the entire department. Then we're also going to hear a little bit about what juror number 3, who was an alternate, what she said. And a lot of people are reporting that she was a pro Karen Reed juror. So we'll see it from her point of view, if that's true, and how a pro Karen Reed juror, I don't want to say before the trial pro Karen Reed, but as the trial went out, she ends up being a not guilty vote potentially, is what everybody was saying. So we're going to listen to what she had to say, read some reports on that, break it down together, answer questions. As always, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the Trooper Proctor situation and people talking about how he got fired, how he got axed, things like that. Well, let's talk about whether or not he has actually gotten fired at this point, or what's happening and what is likely to happen in the future. So when we look at the heading in the title of this article, it says, Karen Reed, lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, relieved of duty, keeps $184,000 pay. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I can't wait to hear what you guys think of that. But he's been relieved of duty and they have removed him from his current post. People are saying just transferred or rehomed, as has been used in this trial. But it is worse than that. It is more than that. It is worse than that. Yes, everybody, it is about 100 degrees outside, but it's nice and chilly in my office, how I like to keep it. So a hoodie is always around. I always keep one on my couch over there in case I need it. So people are saying, yeah, he got a paid vacation. Right. For all of his good deeds, he gets a paid vacation. So let's take a read of this article. And there's another article I want to read before we get to the video of the colonel. Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor, the lead investigator on the Karen Reed murder case, has been relieved of duty effective immediately. Reed, 44, of Mansfield, is charged with second-degree murder, leaving the scene of the accident, resulting in death, and manslaughter while operating a motor vehicle under the influence, which included the lesser subordinate charge related to January 29, 2022, death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The jury could not reach a verdict, and a mistrial was declared Monday. Here's a quote. Upon learning today's result, so it's almost as if they were waiting to see the result of the trial, the department took immediate action to relieve Trooper Michael Proctor of duty and formally transfer him out of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office State Police Detective Unit. Okay? So what really hits me about this quote is we wanted to take immediate action. It's like we've known about these texts. Well, we haven't collectively because I didn't know until the trial, but the proverbial we, including you all making this decision, not you all, the chat, the leaders over there at MSP, they knew about this. They did not take immediate action. If they would have taken immediate action, we would have all known about it and the jury would have known about it. We'll talk about what immediate action really would have looked like and what it looks like now. And this quote was from a Massachusetts State Police spokesperson. This follows our previous decision to open an internal affairs investigation after information about serious misconduct emerged in testimony at trial. This investigation is ongoing. So these are kind of two different avenues. He has been relieved of his duties and transferred out. But also, the internal affairs investigation is still happening. It's still happening. And we're going to talk about what the potential outcomes of that IA investigation could be. But at this point, you know what he's not doing is investigating murders and serious crimes for the Norfolk County DA's office. And that is important because you work your way up there to be a detective there. And it seems like he's losing that. Now, I don't know if you guys remember like the Catholic priests in the old days when these molestation charges would come down and lawyers like myself would sue them and there would be settlements or they would go to trial or whatever would happen. One of the things that was uncovered is these priests would be like transferred from one parish or church to another. They wouldn't even be fired. They wouldn't be shunned. They wouldn't go to jail. They would just transfer them around. And I hope that's not what's happening here to Michael Proctor, where they just transfer him somewhere else where he's just going to do the same thing over and over again. It's also interesting that they say the investigation after information about serious misconduct emerged. Now, misconduct can mean a lot of different things. Misconduct does not necessarily mean a botched investigation or a failed investigation. And I think that's what they're still kind of hiding behind, is that the misconduct is just the language and the way he spoke about her and who he spoke about her to. Proctor will be transferred from the DA's detective unit effective Sunday. Proctor is subject to a duty status hearing and will remain employed by the department until the hearing completes, according to the spokesperson. Although Trooper Proctor is still employed by the department, the decision to relieve him of his duty means he can no longer work cases or function as a trooper at this time. Proctor was placed under internal review in March as a federal probe hung over the investigation he and other troopers in his detective unit performed regarding John O'Keefe's homicide. Proctor testified in the trial. A number of personal texts came out where he was looking for nudes, called her a babe and a whack job, made explicit fun of her gastrointestinal health issues, and ultimately said she hopes she ends her own life. Following the mistrial in the Commonwealth v. Karen Reed, the Massachusetts State Police would like to offer our condolences again to the family of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. We cannot imagine the way in which this result has heightened the O'Keefe family's immeasurable grief, heartache, and sense of loss. John lived a life of honorable service both to the city of Boston and the children entrusted in his care after the unexpected death of his sister and brother-in-law. We will remember him. Our focus maintains on delivering the highest level of police services with professionalism and integrity. So again, he adds here something I think is important that we have talked about a lot in this case, which is the botched investigation, the lack of professionalism, the way that Proctor was acting and the cops were acting, and the lack of evidence and just the bad investigation comes down to and is really sad to the O'Keefe family. It's obviously brutal to Karen Reed. It's the reason she's there. But also to the victim in the case, a botched investigation and bad police work is a major problem and heartache for victims. I'm going to answer a few questions here before we get to the next article. Christopher Wells, just like Chloe, he has been rehomed. Joanne C. Hey, Peter, do you have an ETA on the YSL update? Will you break down the transcript too, please? Absolutely, Joanne, I do. It's going to post at 8:30 p.m. tonight. And we go through multiple videos, the transcript. We break down the Supreme Court order on the writ. Lots to go through. Yobi, they waited so the defense couldn't bring it up in court. Right. Exactly. So that certainly takes the sting and the, oh, shucks, thanks, guys, you really did the right thing out of we took immediate action. It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't want them to be able to say you've been relieved of your post. And there are quotes of your bosses saying this horrible police misconduct. We can't have him investigating other cases. We can't have him screwing up other homicide investigations. Because that's likely how it would have been attacked had this have happened before trial number one. And if there is a trial number two, you better believe they're going to attack it even more with this new information. Frankie's mom, congrats on 401k. Wish I got to see it live. It was fun, but I'm glad you're here. Claire, how many times can mistrial happen before it gets tossed? As far as I know, there's no real limit. I believe lawyers in the past have filed motions to dismiss based on the fact that it's just unfair And in the interest of justice, we got to throw this case out after multiple mistrials, especially if the defendant is sitting in jail all this time, presumed innocent, and they can't convict him or her unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt. But there's no like number where if you have 6 mistrials, then it's over. Jen, who should take him? Such BS. Who would take him? Sorry. You know what's interesting about this? We have cases of negligent hiring that we do sometimes for like a truck driver. If they've got 1 million tickets or they don't even have a license or they have a suspended license, but they're cheap to drive trucks. So some of these companies trying to cut corners, they can be sued for hiring these horrible drivers. Well, you better believe that if he screws up more investigations, that could open up lawsuits from victims, and that could open up shots from defendants on cases that he may be in the future, because anywhere he goes and anybody that hires him, they know about what happened and they know about his past. Would his past investigations be looked at? Potentially. I don't know how far in the past, but I've heard there are some other cases that he's involved in already, and I'm interested to see how this affects them. Some of which you guys have asked me to look into, and if there's enough interest, we will look into those as well. BB, would misconduct be making a decision on guilt 16 hours in? So in my opinion, I think that's wrong and you shouldn't do that. I don't think that's what they're referencing when they're talking about misconduct. I think they're referencing his personal text messages, the way he spoke about her, the looking for nudes, that type of stuff. John, it sounds like JP will be transferred and continue to receive the Canton PD salary plus his new employment salary, right? I don't think he'll be doubling up, but it doesn't sound like he's getting fired just yet. Seems like he's still going to make this $184K, and when they transfer him somewhere else, if and when he starts working, he will make whatever the salary is commensurate with that. I don't know if they drop him down if he loses salary, if it's based on number of years, if it's union negotiated. I don't know the answer to that, but it seems like he is not getting fired at this point. Claire, would they call Proctor at the next trial? So I think they set it up in this trial in ways that they might be able to not call him and just do it with Yuri. But I think the defense would hammer that home. I think the defense could call him. I think the defense, like we already said during the trial, could get out 95% of the bad stuff. So the state might as well call him. I would guess they would call him again. Oh, will this affect the retrial? So it'll definitely affect the way the defense can attack him as a witness. But it doesn't necessarily mean there won't be a retrial. It's something the Commonwealth has to consider, but it also shouldn't be a surprise, right? The Commonwealth knows about this misconduct. The Commonwealth knows about the internal affairs investigation. So I don't think that this is going to really affect their decision at this point. Mary Claire. And Proctor was the assigned lead investigator for the Brian Walsh case. That could prove interesting. Yes, that's one of the cases you guys asked about, which also has Google searches that seem to be very important. I know a little bit about that case, not a ton. Lynn, they could have did it right away just to have it not said in court like the FBI. They could have done it right away because it's clearly the right thing too. No. Will they still go ahead with the lead prosecutor? My guess is yes, but that's still to be determined. Could Proctor possibly be decertified? So let's go into this next article, which kind of talks about the potential outcomes of the internal affairs investigation. Let's take a look at this one. All right. He's been relieved of his duty. Who is he? He's been with the state police for 10 years. Can't perform his duties. They had the text messages on the witness stand. His attorney, Reed's attorney, accused Proctor of covering for witnesses who are also his friends, planting evidence. He says he is not guilty of any wrongdoing. The defense has also questioned the relationship Proctor and his wife had with Canton Selectman Chris Albert and his wife. Albert is the brother of retired Boston police officer Brian Albert, who owned the home where John O'Keefe's body was found. Investigators say Reed ran him over. Proctor has denied all allegations of bias and wrongdoing. He denied all allegations of wrongdoing, right? So in court, he said how horrible all those texts were, but he's denied any allegations of wrongdoing. He will be transferred out of the district attorney's detective unit until Sunday, July 7th, which is interesting. It's only till Sunday, July 7th, following the state police collective bargaining agreement, which requires 5-day notice of a new job assignment. So where will he be? Maybe we'll find out July 7th. The state police said the decision is separate. So this is not a result of the internal affairs investigation, which is very important. More could be coming after that investigation concludes. So this is separate. Proctor's been placed on leave, which means while he is technically on the force and being paid, he is not allowed to function as a state trooper. He is still technically a trooper until his disciplinary hearing. The hearing can end in one of four ways. Number one, he can get his job back. They find no wrongdoing. They find no misconduct. Suit back up. You're in, Proctor. Number two, he could be suspended for a period of time with pay. Then to take it up a notch, he could be suspended without pay. Obviously, that's worse. Or he could receive restricted duties. Now, that's nothing a cop ever wants. It seems like it's not quite being fired or not allowed to be a police officer. And it is very interesting to see just how hard it is to get fired from a job like this. Just how hard it is to lose your job, even if you do it this poorly. Proctor cannot be fired as a result of the hearing. It's the first step in the process that could lead to his eventual termination from the force. A date for the hearing has not been scheduled yet. So all this time, they've had these texts, bureaucracy in motion. It takes forever. And even with the worst result from this hearing that has still not been set yet, he still is not going to be fired at that point. It would just be the first step in a number of steps it would take to get rid of Michael Proctor. And then we have this quote, conduct has consequences. DA Morrissey backed this misogynist, corrupt cop. And 2 hours after he announced he will pursue a second trial against an innocent woman, Karen Reed, the MSP announced that Michael Proctor, the lead investigator for the Commonwealth, has been relieved of duty because of serious misconduct that emerged in testimony at trial. So what's interesting is they say the serious conduct emerged in testimony at trial, but they already knew about it. The words here are just frustrating to me when people act like we're stupid or like we haven't been paying attention. And then here we go. Of course, he says, we look forward to another opportunity to reveal the truth about this unjust prosecution. Good luck. So ultimate confidence from, I think this was Jackson. Yeah, Alan Jackson. But again, they're acting as if what came out on the stand, misconduct that came out during trial, was what really moved the needle on this case. And I don't see it. The interim head of the Massachusetts State Police said they need to take a look in the mirror. We need to work very hard to engage the public in a more meaningful way so we can understand what it is we need to do and where we want to go in order to maintain trust, build trust, and in some cases, regain it. Okay? So we don't have to guess at what that guy was talking about and we get a little more context. We are going to take a look at the press conference and statements that he made here after I answer a few more questions. Daybreak, do you think Lally will use Proctor's relief as an excuse to say he intended to retry but now changed his mind? They could. I mean, they definitely could. Or I could see Lally saying, well, you know, you made some mistakes there with your texts and you've been punished for that, right? You've been relieved, but they didn't fire you and you're still working on case or whatever to try to downplay just how bad it is. Brian, the transfer is him being stood down prior to disciplinary hearing on firing him. Can't straight fire him due to union procedures. Paula Z, this is a joke. I believe this is being done now to save face, but he's still employed. He'll be back on cases after time passes. Just to see how this affected and how embarrassing this is for cops, especially MSP. We're going to watch this press conference. And I honestly feel bad for this guy that he's got to stand up there and answer for Proctor. This is so embarrassing for my state of Massachusetts. Hopefully Buchanan and Tully are next, maybe even Morrissey. Kurt, what do you think the correct way for the Commonwealth to proceed based on the evidence, DA, ego, track record, et cetera? What would you do? I would call them and say, can we come to some agreement? Will she plead to a DUI or a reckless driving, take the ticket, and we'll just assume that we didn't have enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she actually hit John O'Keefe. I would try to get something like that done. That would obviously piss off John O'Keefe's family, so I understand that. I don't know what the conversations are there with them to get her to plead to something. She may just say no to that. She may say yes to that. If I was her lawyer, I may advise her, that's not a bad deal. In this case, get behind us. You don't go to jail. You take a class and it's over and points on your license. Potentially, depending on how all the laws work there with DUI, could be a little different than Florida. But that's honestly what I would do. I would not want to prosecute this again. I don't think they have evidence that she hit him. I don't think they have evidence that she killed him, that she intended to hurt him. I don't think they have evidence of that. So I would try for something else. And if you want to try to still get some kind of a win, I would try to find some almost nothing plea deal that you can try to spin into a win. And then eventually, if she does sue you, you have something that says, well, she did technically commit a crime. She even admitted to it. Something like that is what I would try. But at the end of the day, I would have to realize and just suck it up and bite the bullet and say, I'm the prosecutor. I got to fight for truth and justice. We got to drop this case. And if she sues us and scrutiny comes down, it is what it is. And the truth has to be important. And we have to care about truth, even if it's bad for us. That's what I would do. Honestly, it would suck. It would not be easy, but that's what I would do. Call me Jen after 3 years. We can be on a first name basis. I'm just not sure how YouTube would like your screen name. Joe, will this change the prosecutor's decision to retry? I don't think so, but it could affect it. Nana Banana, I think it is the night of drinking with Higgins in his patrol car, the lost badge and firearm. We'll find out, right? I guess we'll find out exactly what all happened. Rachel Mills, do you think if Karen Reed had not been an attractive white woman, the consequence of Proctor's actions would have happened? I don't know. Because it took a lot for them to happen, right? Maribel, thank you for keeping this case in the forefront. This is not over. Yeah, of course, there are going to be people that are saying, we're over this case, complaining about it, whatever, which is fine. My personal opinion is if there's something to discuss, we'll discuss it. We're not just going to talk about it every day. A ton of you sent me the video we're about to watch. And then, of course, a couple of the little clips on juror number 3. How do you think this impacts the jurors now? The next set of jurors, I think it depends on how it comes out with the defense. This set of jurors, they heard it all and saw it all. My guess is none of them liked Proctor. And there's actually a comment from the alternate juror about Proctor we're going to hear. Keep it simple. My first live, well, it's actually live. Understand why you play court at super speed, have to put you at slower speed. You sound a little drunk. I get it. Everybody likes to watch it at their own speed. And that's what's so cool about YouTube and technology, right? We can all click that gear and put it on whatever speed works for us. John, is that Brady listed? It should be, it will be. They'll turn over whatever they have, especially from the IA investigation as well. That'll all be Brady material. Nona, I felt an audible gasp from the jurors like WTH. Minota, jury, not guilty of second degree, hung on lesser. I've heard some reports about this. I don't know it to be true. I want to wait till we actually hear from a juror or some legitimate report that happened. If that happens, again, that'll be something we discuss on a future video. If it's all just kind of like hearsay, like they say, yeah, we were never going to convict her. Nothing officially happened. She was not found not guilty on the superior charge. So I don't see how that becomes a hung jury situation. Nicole, Peter, how long do you think it will take for a poll of the jury to go public, or even better, before jurors speak out? Usually it's sooner rather than later. They don't usually wait a couple months. My guess is people are beating down their door for it right now. Could it just be the small town thinking in that area that makes them trust law enforcement over everything, even scientific proof? I mean, there were an astonishing amount of connections between the witnesses and law enforcement officers in this case. So I don't know. Annie, Peter, if it was a guilty verdict, would he have been relieved of duty, do you think? That's a good question. I think I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt and say there are some good people over there at MSP. Maybe not all of them, but they were going to make this happen regardless. They didn't want to hurt the investigation or the case, but they knew it was the right thing to be done. So regardless of the verdict, I think they would have done the right thing, I hope. Please look into the murder of Aaron Christensen. Okay. If KR is getting a DUI, the McAlberts should too. They didn't test their blood and not as much data on who was driving when and all of that, but I get what you're saying. Trust me, I get what you're saying. Symbolic film here, The Place Beyond the Pines. I think I started that, or maybe I did watch that. On a related note, what does it take to actually impeach a witness? Multiple Commonwealth witnesses appeared to change their testimony from previous depositions, grand jury testimony, but nothing came of it. So impeaching them is just shedding some doubt on their credibility. And at the end of the day, the jury has to determine whether they're credible. So you're impeaching them is just showing that they have prior inconsistent statements, asking, closer to the time that this happened, you're probably more with it or it's more true, and trying to just shed light on the lack of credibility of their statements. But at the end of the day, the jury has to make that determination. I'm a photographer too, and that is the name of my studio. Oh, now that makes sense. Head of Massachusetts State Police statement. I tried to link The YouTube video, CBS Boston. Yes, we have it. And this is a perfect transition to it. Let's bring it up. Whoops. Here we go.
Yeah, I think I've been very clear, and I want to remain very clear. Misconduct in any way, shape, or form of the Massachusetts State Police will not be tolerated. I think I've said that I condemn those comments in the strongest terms possible. They are not reflective of the Massachusetts State Police. That's not where we want to be as an organization.
So again, the focus seems to be on the comments made in the text messages. It seems to be that's the misconduct that they are condemning the most, and he is unequivocal about it. Those are horrible. The strongest way I can, I condemn them. That's not what we're about. That's not who we are.
I believe that we will certainly continue to monitor that, and as we are moving through the process of our internal affairs investigation. Again, due process.
Can't really hear the questions, but we can get most of the context from his answers, just FYI.
Again, due process, we are evaluating that, looking at it. We're going to continue to investigate it. We have, as you know, initiated an internal affairs investigation early on in this process. Part of that is to monitor the case that was ongoing. We wanted to make sure we had all the information available to us through the trial process. I also want to point out that trial process currently is unresolved, and we have an open internal affairs investigation. So I'm not really in a place where I'm going to comment on that any further.
So he is a little bit limited because, again, we have a hung jury. The trial is not over. It is not resolved. Everything's not done. And Proctor has, it seems to be multiple hearings or dates that he's waiting for in the future that he doesn't want to comment on. He doesn't want to affect. He wants to let due process happen. He wants to see what the outcomes are, and then maybe he'll be able to comment more in the future. He's not wrong about that.
I will say very generally that we monitored the criminal trial in an effort to get as much information as possible, as it may or may not reflect on members of the Massachusetts State Police and their conduct. And we wanted to make sure we had all of that before we made a decision. We also wanted to respect
So they watched the trial generally, they said, to see how it reflected on the Massachusetts State Police. And they wanted to make sure they had all the information. It's like, you guys, we did, the watchers, the jury, and even the defense at times had to wait until the trial to see what that stuff is. MSP did not. That was all readily available to them. They could have read it with their own eyes. They could have questioned these witnesses themselves. And they didn't. So I am a little bit like, just relax. Don't act like you guys did this quickly or swiftly.
In their conduct, and we wanted to make sure we had all of that before we made a decision. We also wanted to respect the trial process, and we want to be mindful of the ongoing internal affairs investigation.
We'll go to Todd and then Mawn. So you spoke about policies and procedures. What changes have been made or will be made to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, we're going to continue to look at this, and we are hyper-focused on that right now. We have been in a process for the past 16 months of evaluating places for improvement. We are very mindful that there are always improvements to be made on the Massachusetts State Police. We have drilled down and concentrated our efforts on 6 general areas, all that are reflective of what we do on a daily basis and how.
So they have nailed down on 6 areas that they really need to improve that he is going to list out. So this is interesting. This is where their focus is. And let's think about which ones specifically relate to this trial.
How we are perceived in the public eye. We want to continue to make sure we do on a daily basis and how we are perceived in the public eye.
Because they care about how they're perceived in the public eye.
We want to continue to make sure that we can provide the services to the public that they demand and deserve. Those areas where we're concentrating most of our efforts now are, I could break them down and say that in no particular order, community trust, legitimacy, and engagement.
Community trust, legitimacy, and engagement. You think that has anything to do with this case? You think they're worried about the community potentially not trusting MSP? They're going to have to try to engage with the community and build that trust back, as they should. I am not one to condemn people for trying to fix their problem. I'm not going to say, haha, you admitted it. You guys are the worst. You even know you're the worst. It's like, no, they're taking responsibility as much as they can. They're trying to do the right thing. It doesn't fix or change what happened in the past. And they may make more mistakes and we may hammer them for those mistakes with how they handle Proctor or anything else. But this is what they should do. They should put an action plan in place to try and fix where they are failing miserably. And I think after this trial, a lot of you guys live in the community or the surrounding communities in Massachusetts, and you do not trust them. They need to figure out a way to fix that.
Diversity, culture as a standard, community trust, legitimacy, and engagement. Diversity, culture as a standalone issue for the Mass State Police, examining that, both externally.
Diversity and culture within the Massachusetts State Police.
Externally and internally. Training, leadership and wellness, and media and public relations. Those are the areas that we're focusing on, have been focusing on for the past 16 months.
These are the areas we've been focusing on the past 16 months. That's when I went, oof. You've already been focusing this? I thought this was like you're rolling out something new.
Leadership and wellness, both externally and internally. Training.
Training, okay? Like on how to bag and tag evidence, on maybe chain of custody, on documentation, on recording interviews, on keeping a clean record. That's pretty important when it comes to training.
Leadership and wellness, and media and public relations. Those are the
leadership and wellness. Okay. You could say there are parts that cross over there. Yeah, he's the interim colonel of MSP, but public relations and speaking to the media and how the media views them and how the public views them. Do you think they need to work on that? And again, they said they've been working on this for 16 months. So you think that PR team is maybe the one that pushed them to say, listen, we need to rehome Proctor now. And we need to talk about how we took immediate action to rehome him. Yes, 401K. Thank you so much, Sandy D. And a little wink, wink with the super chat there. Make sure you guys subscribe if you haven't already and hit that like button. If you're watching on Twitter or X, hit the heart button on that tweet as well. So anybody else on those platforms that wants to watch this type of content, maybe they'll come check it out and get in our chat with all of you guys, the best chat in YouTube.
The areas that we're focusing on, have been focusing on for the past 16 months. Well, I think we're gonna see additional scrutiny on all of these investigations as a result of what has come about in regard.
He knows it. They're going to see additional scrutiny on all these investigations now that all of this has come to light, and he's right.
Regards to the most recent trial, and we're prepared for that.
So it's not going to be a surprise in future trials when other defense lawyers try to use similar tactics in cross-examining them. The question is going to be, do they have a third-party culprit that's also so connected to all of these people? Or is it just going to be you screwed up in that other case, so you must have screwed up in mine, which is a very different argument and can't quite come in and have the same effect that it did in this case. So this is unique. Even though there are issues with the MSP, with Proctor, with a lot of these cops, there are still a lot of unique things that make Karen Reed's case very different because of the totality of the circumstances.
And what do you see is your ability to affect that? And related to that, what is the governor her expectations are for the agency? What she is expecting?
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon us to be in a continuous cycle of earning, maintaining public trust and legitimacy. That's we cannot.
They need to earn and maintain public trust and legitimacy. I mean, legitimacy has got to be a hard one to swallow, right? Like you're the cops, you're the law. You got to prove that you're legitimate. That's how you know you're in a bad way.
Do our job effectively without that. And we are hyper-focused on being able to do that and conducting ourselves in a way that demonstrates that we can do that and that we are worthy of trust. And as we move forward in this organization, we will be mindful of that, and we will be making sure that we're all doing our very best to show the public that we can be what they need us to be.
Have you been in touch with the feds and their investigation?
I'm not in a position really to say anything about anybody else's investigation. I will tell you that we are still actively involved because there is a trial process ongoing, and we are certainly actively involved in the internal affairs process.
So they're actively involved in both sets of processes at this point, which I think is pretty interesting. Angel, Peter, will they put Proctor on the Brady list? My guess is he's already on it, but yeah. Drunk driving patrol car, not logging evidence, no chain of custody, reports when late, written late and wrong, not divulging personal connections to the case, etc. He wants folks on vulgar text to divert attention. Well, that's the headline, right? That's the juice. That's the tea. But you're right. If they focus on that and they say, listen, me calling her all these names and cursing and using bad language doesn't affect the case. But you know what does affect the case? All of this stuff, which is also misconduct, not following SOPs, should be changing, should be a problem, should be the reason he is put on leave and eventually fired. It's not just the text messages. But that seems to be a lot of what they're apologizing for, calling misconduct, because of course, everybody can agree on that. They don't want to admit X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, well, we have to take this head on. We have to be accountable to ourselves, to each other, to the residents and visitors to the Commonwealth. We have to look in the mirror. We have to be hyper-focused on making sure that we are professional and that we are in a continuous cycle of evaluation and improvement and refinement. And we need to work very hard to engage the public in a more meaningful way so that we can understand what it is that we need to do and where we want to go in order to maintain trust, build trust, and in some cases regain it. And I believe that those 6 fundamental areas that we're pushing forward are going to help us do that. I'm confident of it.
And again, those are a little bit vague and a little broad, but that's purposeful. And he's right. If they hit all those out of the park, they'll be doing a lot better. And Mary Claire, that's called just properly investigating all leads, right? Which is what cops tell us they do in every trial and what they're supposed to do. Likolaugushka. A couple people have told me about this case. I will look into it. I heard there's no criminal charges yet, so it's hard for me to really, add a lot of value to a video if there's not really a legal process going on. But I have the gist of it, and I'll try to look more into it. Follow up on impeachment of a witness. When and how is a witness found guilty of perjury? You have to prove they knowingly lied or made a false statement under oath. So it's a lot harder. You have to make sure you lock them in, and you have to feel really confident about it. It's crazy how little perjury is actually prosecuted with how often it is threatened. I've done a whole video on it. If you want to go check in the archives on our page on perjury, why it's so hard or so not often prosecuted, even when it feels like it. And people think perjury happens all the time. I think it was around the Johnny Depp time that I did this. Is the IA investigation different from the FBI investigation? Yes. So Internal Affairs Department in MSP is doing an investigation completely separate from the FBI's investigation. Mom for Life said, what's next for the FBI? Maybe some official findings. Maybe they indict some people. I don't know. I mean, maybe some actual official statements of what their positions are and what they think, because now that we know what their experts said, I feel like they've got to have something to say about this investigation and prosecution, right? And if they want to stand for justice and truth, what are they doing? Let's hear from them.
Yeah, I know we were involved in that in a variety of ways. That is a Worcester Police Department investigation. It would probably be better to ask that question of them. We were in a support role. It's a role we find ourselves in frequently, resource provider and force multiplier for the Worcester Police Department.
That's not your job. You said you wanted to wait until the trial concluded before making these remarks, before taking any action. But now we're in a situation where we're between trials.
Right.
Do you anticipate taking action, making reforms before the next trial? And will the action that you take against Michael Proctor, if any, are you concerned that could have an impact on the outcome of the trial?
Well, I think in regards to the action we took, yesterday, the important piece for us was to continuously monitor the trial, to take the information provided during the pendency of that trial in-house in order to make the decisions that we made. We made the decisions we made yesterday based on things that we learned during the trial process and in other ways. I can't speak to the impact that it may have moving forward. I know that for us as an organization, we wanted to make sure we took appropriate and decisive action when we had as much information that would allow us to do that, and we did.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Appropriate and decisive action. That's what they wanted to do. Michaela, it seems like the chain of custody was broken for almost all of the evidence in the case to begin with. If it is found that Proctor mishandled the case, would charges be dropped? If it comes out that he, planted evidence or changed evidence, altered evidence, things like that, yes. If there was purposeful conduct on his part, yes, it could cause the charges to be dropped or some major ramifications, but it's more likely to continue to be accusations made by the defense. And really his misconduct is some of the other stuff we've talked about more than somebody's going to find out and say that he actually smashed the taillight and planted the pieces. I don't expect that to happen, but if it did, then yes, that could make a big difference. Any idea what John's bro said to Karen after court? I think somebody said something like, I'm not done with you yet. I don't know. I couldn't read his lips, so I'm not sure. Linda, will there be a department focus on not drinking after driving? There sure should be. Should be a personal focus on that. Hi, Peter. Love y'all. The difference between Young Thug and Karen Reed mistrial being double jeopardy is the judge and DA misconduct versus hung jury right. That's what I told Hubs when said no difference. So if they declare a mistrial in Young Thug because of that misconduct or because of some action by the state or the judge, then yes, that's double jeopardy. That's like the definition of double jeopardy. They screwed up. They've already put him in jeopardy. It's over. In this case, a mistrial is not double jeopardy. It is by definition and legally speaking, not double jeopardy. So that is the main difference. It sounds like you hit the nail on the head. How many others have been affected by their lackadaisical approach on investigation? I am not a conspiracy theorist usually, but I am a realist. I'm not like an eternal optimist. I would have to say there's multiple cases and investigations that they have screwed up or botched, but either the work wasn't done enough, the defendant took a plea deal, the defendant did it anyways, because you can still botch an investigation, screw it up, or try to force it and get the right person, right? And they take a plea deal, or the lawyers weren't good enough or weren't willing to fight the entire Canton Police Department or MSP or, whatever it may be. There's a lot of reasons why we might not know about it. Retrial question. Will the judge be the same? Most likely, yes. Will new Proctor situation further affect Karen Reed's case? Could it cause the new trial to be reconsidered? It could, but I don't think so. I don't think this is going to come as a big surprise. They already had to deal with the Proctor problem the first time around. They're not going to be surprised if they have to deal with it again. They didn't expect that to get better, I don't think. Public scrutiny is a great birthday present. Paula Z. Peter, this is a tough one, but I have to ask. I know how badly the O'Keefe family wants and deserves justice, but why do you think they are so bent on Karen Reed being guilty, especially when science proves John was not hit by a car? So I don't blame them. I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people are angry at them. I don't know what they know. We have heard comments about people seeing texts between Karen and her lawyer. I don't know what those said. Maybe they believe because she said she hit him that she did. Maybe they know about conversations or fights that they had that didn't come out in trial that make them think that she did it or wanted it to happen. Maybe it has to do with how she's acted after this all happened. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't land where they land, but they are dealing with so much more than I'm dealing with. I'm looking at this objectively like a lawyer. They are looking at this like losing another child in this horrific way and dealing with grandchildren who have gone through more trauma and grief than any kid or person should have to go through in their entire life in their just short period of time on this earth. So it's really hard for me to blame them or be angry at them for maybe coming to a conclusion too quickly and sticking with it, because it's really hard to change somebody's mind. We should all know that. And while if they do believe that Karen Reed did this, I disagree with them, but maybe they know more than I do. I don't know. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I know that their mindset has to be miserable and unimaginable. Wafa, I work as a QA in pharmaceutical. I'm surprised that MSP doesn't have a quality and compliance department to review these PO work reports ready for a new case now, Peter. So usually superior or supervisor officers do review reports, and they do have different ways that all this stuff happens, which is kind of an overarching issue. Erica, Proctor was the lead investigator in Walsh case. Good look. Just a witch. Peter, credible sources, unanimous. I don't know about credible source. I have not seen like court personnel, lawyers, or a juror say this, so it's really hard for me to say I feel confident about this, but I have seen hung 6 to 6 on lesser charges. We'll see. We'll see how it all works. What's involved in losing qualified immunity? A lot of different things, and it really depends on the immunity agreement, so it's hard to just kind of answer this in a vacuum. Christy, not one person concerts to Proctor's attitude and behavior. That shows it's systemic. Verbal judo cliche terms the public wants to hear. I do think there was a little bit of that, although overall I do think he did a good job. He did admit wrongdoing and said they were trying to do things to fix that. Bob Ross, MSP loses credibility by waiting to relieve Proctor until public heard trial. DA, by retrying with no evidence, is headed down the same road, self-inflicted damage. Do you think there was jury tampering since, in my opinion, the state did not prove anything? If we're really hearing 6 to 6 or that multiple jurors were guilty, multiple were not guilty, it's hard for me to think jury tampering. Is a neutral third party doing the investigation, or is MSP investigating themselves? So every department has an internal affairs department. If you've ever seen a movie, sometimes they're hated. They're looked at as the people that, get other cops in trouble, when in reality, they're just investigating other cops. So they're kind of an independent group within that department, but the FBI obviously is independent of MSP altogether. Cash, if the FBI gets involved, witnesses will whistle once prison becomes a potential for them. We'll see. People claim that was going to happen during this trial. Thomas, do you think they would really retry this case, or likely just said it to save face? I think they would really try this case. If they were going to try it once, it really wouldn't shock me if they tried it again. In NYS, the governor is the top law enforcement officer. Maybe Mass governor said something has to be done with Proctor. Well, we know she's come out and said she is none too pleased with Mr. Proctor. Message to your site about corrupt people in power who messed up my life. Proctor's text /MSP. How MSP is handling this has only solidified my mentality. Squab Bob. I'm thinking that O'Keefe's Karen Reed did not literally kill John O'Keefe, but still blame her for his death in the house and the whole incident with Higgins. That's a potential as well. Like if it really was Higgins, or if she just left him there and didn't help him, why didn't she go back and check on him? That there could be an element of that too. I don't know. Ginger Avenger. Could they push for a new judge after her hot mic said, I didn't pay attention to the evidence? Highly unlikely for that reason, but they could try to recuse her or get her disqualified one way or the other. I don't think they would be successful personally. We don't know she didn't have some role in his death. We just know it wasn't her SUV. I'm on KR not guilty side, but people need to leave the O'Keefes alone. I am sad at some supporters' behavior towards them. They've lost 2 children now. We cannot judge them. I can't imagine their pain. KB, I always find it fascinating that this spokesman is like Proctor, a representative of the Mass State Police. He is as guilty as Proctor. I don't know about that. I don't know if I'd say as guilty, but he better make it right and do everything he can too. Okay, so let's transition a little bit to juror number 3, and let's listen to the report of what she had to say. And then we're going to listen to basically the same thing that this reporter says, but in black and white typed. And I think it's almost easier to follow that way, but we'll watch it for the, visual and the audible. And then the people that learn by reading, we're going to hit all those different cues for the last couple minutes of this video, just to kind of learn what we have. This is a juror that did not deliberate, that reports were, I don't know how legitimate these reports were. They thought based on her facial expressions, what she was saying, what she was doing, that she was pro Karen Reed. So we're going to get what her position would have been, what her vote would have been, and what her other thoughts were about the trial.
At 6, we are hearing from a juror in this case.
WBZ's Louisa Moeller spoke to a woman who was actually one of the alternate jurors.
I just spoke with a member of the jury in the Karen Reed trial. She would like to be referred to as juror number 3. Obviously, these folks have been through 9 weeks of hard work. She did not want to go on camera, but was willing to let me take some handwritten notes and I'll consult them for accuracy. So juror number 3 was an alternate in this trial. That means that she was present throughout the entire trial, could listen to evidence and testimony, but was not present during deliberations. First, I asked her, how do you feel at this moment? She told me, quote, exhausted and disappointed. She told me she was, quote, not in the room where it happens. That's the.
So she was disappointed, which basically everybody was. That's not, a shocking statement, but that's somebody who cares about this outcome, right? She cared about this outcome. She sat there for weeks and weeks and weeks and listened to endless witnesses and testimony. And she's frustrated that they weren't able to come to a decision.
Deliberation. She said, quote, it was a lot to sit quietly in a room for almost a week. There were, of course.
So the alternate jurors were sitting in a room waiting in case somebody fell off, got sick, whatever, and they had to be replaced. So they did keep them on board. I didn't know that. I missed that part if the judge announced that publicly. But imagine how brutal that was. I mean, there were some people in this chat that were like, oh, I just can't do anything. All I can think about is this verdict. Why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Imagine being an alternate juror sitting in a room by yourself with your thoughts, going over your notes, knowing what you think if she had her notes. I don't know if she did. Going over how you think maybe this should be an easy decision or what the heck's going on. I need to convince some people. How did this happen? Oh, boy.
Quote, it was a lot to sit quietly in a room for almost a week. There were, of course, 5 days of deliberations. I asked her what she thought about this case and Karen Reed's guilt or innocence. She said, quote, I approached this trial as if I was taking one of my graduate level classes. I would get an A+ in note taking. And then I'm paraphrasing here. She says, I believe the Commonwealth did not do their job to convince me beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen Reed was guilty. Paraphrasing again, no one saw exactly what happened. She told me that.
So that's interesting, right? So the Commonwealth didn't prove that Karen Reed was guilty, a la her vote would have been not guilty. Nobody saw what happened. So if that would have been the standard in Alec Murdaugh's case, would she have also voted not guilty if she was on that jury? Because by law, that's not the ultimate answer. But if you feel like the evidence is so bad and so lacking that you have no clue what happened, and the only thing you feel like that would fix that, or maybe it was so contradictory. Jen McCabe said she saw this at this time. Nagel said she saw that. Albert said he saw this. Higgins said he saw that. If it's just so contradictory and the evidence is so lacking that you just feel like they didn't prove anything and nobody was there, it was just an interesting comment to me that is what she kind of stated as one of the big reasons. P. Malik said, can the judge decide not to take the case the second time to trial? She could recuse herself if there's some kind of conflict or issue. It's very unlikely and unusual for something like that to happen.
That watching both families throughout this process was painful out that Karen Reed was guilty. Paraphrasing again, no one saw exactly what happened. She told me that watching both families throughout this process was painful and tragic. And then I asked her about Trooper Michael Proctor's testimony and his explosive and inappropriate texts about Karen Reed. She said
Before we get to Proctor, just like everybody else, watching the two families was excruciating. It was brutal to watch for her. We all said it the whole time too, that it just sucks, especially when you're sitting there like her and you're like, this is it. This is all they have. They're not even proving who did this. Nobody knows what happened. So we're looking at both families feeling bad for him as a juror. That's what she was doing. I can understand that. So KT, sure, this could be an issue. In Florida, DUIs, first-time DUIs are misdemeanors. Even second-time DUIs are misdemeanors. So it would depend on how it works in Massachusetts. I don't think we have to go down that road unless we hear of some kind of plea deal with that.
And tragic. And then I asked her about Trooper Michael Proctor's testimony and his explosive and inappropriate texts about Karen Reed. She said his testimony would not have, even if it were not included in this case, she still believes that there would not have been enough evidence to convict Reed.
So that's interesting. And that's a proper explanation of reasonable doubt based on lack of evidence. No matter how much you hate Proctor, no matter how much you think that he did wrong, no matter how big of a jerk he thinks he was, if he would have never testified, she still said they just didn't have enough to prove it. Paula, sure. I don't mind the question at all. I think it was a good question. I think a lot of people have that question. And I did not think that you were blaming them at all. I think it was a legitimate question. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all legitimate questions, and respectful conversation and discourse and even disagreement in the chat is always a good thing. It's the way we can learn. But that is really interesting to me that she felt like even without Proctor, they lose. I feel the same way. Anybody agree with me? Like, they didn't need the disgusting text messages to get this not guilty verdict. And that's kind of the point. They don't need the cover up and the third party culprit. They don't need that sensational story. Does it help? Yes. Should it be part of the defense? Yes. I don't think it should be the entire defense. Do you think if Karen didn't text Higgins initially that John would still be alive? I do believe she's innocent. Honestly, I have to be honest with you here. I have no clue. I have no clue what caused this, what started this, how it happened, how it ended. I have no clue. The evidence and testimony I trusted the most, in my opinion, was that he did not get hit by a car. That's the only thing I feel like I know. Outside of that, I could be convinced of a couple different scenarios.
As for the trial and the jurors, she says, it was a lovely group of people. We celebrated birthdays. We even did puzzles. Enough.
So let's listen to this again. So now she gets asked about the jurors. And what she says to me is interesting, because think about in our chat, on X, wherever it is you hear people talking on the whatever channel you're watching the streamed trial, whatever that chat is acting like, does it seem like everybody was getting along and everybody was happy and everybody would say everybody was great people even if you disagreed? Because she, not knowing and not being there for the 5 days of deliberation, said this was a wonderful group. They all got along, celebrating birthdays and doing puzzles together. But by the end, when they were being sent back over and over again from Judge Canone, you heard jurors gasping and looking up and even some crying potentially from people in the courtroom, that they were not happy with each other, not getting along. It deteriorated because there were multiple people on both sides. So I find that very interesting that this was the sentiment, and it almost always is, as long as you agree, this is the sentiment. And here's how she explains it, but it doesn't seem like it ended like that. And again, when everybody's on the same team, everybody agrees, everybody is happy and feels like they got justice, and it was a brutal situation, but we did it together, and it was an experience we're always going to have, like the Daybell jurors. They're willing to talk. But when it's contentious and there's some negativity, maybe they're less likely to talk, and we'll see.
To convict Reed. As for the trial and the jurors, she says, it was a lovely group of people. We celebrated birthdays. We even did puzzles together. Now, you've heard from my colleague, Christina Rex, and from legal experts that a jury is supposed to be representative of the public. And of course, if you talk to any member of the public, there's lots of differing opinions about this case. So there will certainly be more information from jury members and everyone else in the coming days. In Norfolk County, Louisa Moeller, WBZ News.
Really interesting.
So that's what we have from the video portion. But now I want to bring up just the same thing in text to read it exactly and see how this juror perceived the situation, different pieces of evidence, and how the jury was. Orgborg said, or if the judge is the same, do all the rulings and evidence carry over, or is it all relitigated? So the decisions that she's made, court orders will stay. But you can ask for reconsideration on certain things, especially now knowing how the evidence came out. And that's something we've done in cases where they either went to trial a second time or we're going to. We'd say, Judge, now that we know how they're going to use this, it's pure propensity argument. It is not for motive at all, whatever it may be. You can ask the judge to reconsider. Absolutely. You can try to get new things in. You can say we have to respond to what they did. Now that we know they're going to put this evidence in, we need to bring this evidence in. So some things can change. If they didn't argue cover up, how could the defense argue taillights around at the scene? Well, interesting you should ask that, because I had no other explanation for it until the FBI guy got up there and was like, maybe John O'Keefe threw the cup at it. Is that plausible? Is that a reasonable doubt? I don't know. I think they could have used that as an option. They could have used a cover-up as an option. They could have used, we have no idea what the heck happened, but it's up to them to prove it as an option. So they could still, that's the benefit of being a defense attorney is you can give a bunch of, yeah, that's possible, but the state can't. That's the difference. Heard there was bullying at the end. Listen, I don't know, and it could be bullying, and I would hate it if that was the truth. But you can also understand how some people, just like a lot of people in this chat, were really frustrated. You can understand how some people were getting frustrated. Like, what are you guys doing? The judge clearly wants us to change our vote and come unanimous. Let's just do this. So you can understand how emotions can boil over at that point. I hope nobody pushed it too far, and I hope there was no bullying. Grant, forget Proctor. What about the cases involving Trooper Paul? As the Reconstructionist, would you appeal his cases? It depends on what his testimony was and how he got there in those cases. I don't think he's got a lot of experience. I don't think he's got a lot of cases under his belt, if I had to guess. Amanda, can they change the scenario of him being hit by a car? I don't think so. I can't imagine a way in which they'd be able to do that. Peter, is there a way the defense could hire a tech expert to review the SP camera software, original files to determine if altered on purpose for court? Probably. That is expensive. And what is it going to get you? So whenever, as an attorney on a case, when you're going to hire experts and you're going to pay money, it's got to be a lot of bang for your buck. So sometimes it's not there. I don't know. I would assume you can try to get somebody to at least look into this. I don't know what they'd be able to find. I've had tech experts sometimes tell me, yeah, we tried. It's impossible. The data's not there. Still have to pay them. Jen, dang it, my last one didn't show. Do you think that the outcome would be different if there is not an attorney on the next jury? I haven't heard confirmation that there was an attorney on this one. I think the outcome could be different because it's going to be a completely new jury, not just one person, but 12 new people. And I've seen it happen where two different juries, one's hung and one gets the verdict. So it could happen. Do you buy body cams? I don't know what this means. We get them in cases where it's relevant, if that's what you mean. Oh, here's the one, Jen, that didn't go through. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want to know, somebody said, when do they do puzzles? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I want to know who deleted Karen's data location in April. It's a good question. If they knew, or if they had evidence that they could present to prove that, I feel like we would have seen it. So I think it's just kind of another unanswerable question based on relevant and reliable evidence. Like, I just don't think that they have that reliable evidence. It's weird. I don't know. There seemed like a lot happened that we should have gotten more of. Okay, here's the last article we're going to take a read of together. All right, question. How are you feeling? Exhausted, disappointed. I was not in the room where it happens. It was a lot to sit in a quiet room for almost a week. Did the Commonwealth meet its burden? I approached this trial as if I was taking one of my graduate level classes. I would get an A+ in note taking. I believe the Commonwealth did not do their job to convince me beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen Reed was guilty of the charges. So it seemed like at least she understood the assignment, understood the burden, and held them to their burden. What was the trial like? Tragic. That's her definition, or that's how she described the trial. Watching both families throughout the process was painful. And again, I think that has to do with the fact that she's watching and be like, that's it. Did Trooper Proctor's testimony influence your feeling on the case? Even if his testimony had not been included in the case, I still believe there would not have been enough. What was this jury like? It was a lovely group of people. We did puzzles. We celebrated birthdays together. So it was a pretty short interview, which again interests me on, will this juror give more interviews? Will we learn more from her? I think it's a she. How much does she actually know, and how much can she help us understand about what actually happened and how we got to a hung verdict? It's always tough to decipher in these situations. Chusets. How about Paul O'Keefe threatening Karen on the way out of the courtroom? Very unsettling. I don't know what he said. I don't know what he did. I don't know who yelled at who, so it's hard for me to really comment on that. Bocephus. There is no way that this case should be retried. How much money did they waste the first time around? Ridiculous. Had to be 7 figures. I mean, think about how many witnesses were also paid by the people taxpayer dollars are paying those people to come and testify. It's crazy. It's crazy the amount of resources that were used in this trial, in this case. Anne Marie B., what happens if 2 hung juries? They try it a third time. I know it's not what a lot of people want to hear, but that's unfortunately the truth. So there's one other thing somebody sent me, which was an interview with Karen Reed at some point in the process. I don't know when it is, what she said. It would be outside of what happened at the trial. We have admittedly now seen some things that happen outside the trial. If you guys would be interested in me breaking that down or reacting to that, let me know in the comments. If you're not, I get it and I don't take offense to it. Paul said we're not done with you yet. Source confirmed. Okay, I don't know. I didn't see it or hear it myself, so it's hard for me to really jump on that. Bodie, will you please go through the YSL ex parte transcript with us? I know I already asked, but hoping you saw both. Bodie. I did see, and yes, we will. 8:30 tonight. We're going to go through the whole thing. It will be pre-recorded. I will try to be in the chat. If not, throw your questions and comments in there because I'm trying to get my dad's schedule. He's in North Carolina for the month. So I'm trying to get his schedule lined up to where we can go live together at the same time, answer your questions. But we're going to break down that and so much more. We talk about the recusal. We talk about the hearing that happened where the judge basically lays out his defense. My dad's got a lot of thoughts. I should probably say, my dad's thoughts are not always my thoughts. Disclaimer before you watch that video, just FYI, you're not going to want to miss it. He gets he takes some shots. We'll just put it that way. He takes some shots. So, appreciate you, Pete. Your moral and balanced thinking is rare and valuable. I especially admire how you give respect to every question you receive. Matthew, thank you. I try. I really, really try to do that. And this type of a comment and compliment are the ones that hit the most because it's so easy to forget how important this type of stuff is. And this is what makes the channel great and interesting to me. And I think to you guys too. Michelle, do you think maybe some of these strongly held convictions were around DUI? That's a great question. But I mean, that's something we ask in every DUI type of trial as we dig into that. And some people, I will just tell you, will tell me right off the bat, I could never sit on a DUI trial. My grandma was killed in a DUI accident. That happens in every jury selection for DUI trials that we've had. So that is possible. I think that's a great question. Jebby, will you comment on Minneapolis? I don't know what this means. I have been to North Carolina twice, both briefly. I love North Carolina myself. Attorney Melanie Little, solid in footage of the waterfall. Apparently Higgins was play fighting, then pulling the finger at John and hinting at an issue. I heard a little bit about this. I think that Alan Jackson may have even mentioned it in his closing, but I'm not positive. Try Sarah. If PO did say that, is it enough for a restraining order? No, not in this situation. Part of the victim's family being angry, walking out of a courtroom of a defendant accused of killing your brother. It wouldn't be enough in my opinion. Renee, thanks for the super chat. And that is all we have. Okay. Hey, we were real close to an hour this time. I appreciate you guys so much. Please don't forget to hit the like button, like the tweet, like the YouTube video, subscribe to our page, follow us, all of the YouTube and social media things. You guys are truly the best. Another trial in the books, which is always wild. Thank you, Lisa. And I will catch you guys on the next one. The next one will be tonight, 8:30 p.m. Hit that reminder bell so you don't miss it. I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.